Warm welcome to this edition of Correspondence. This week we are in Versailles, France's royal city just outside Paris that was home to Louis XIV, XV and XVI. Now the famous castle is closed due to the coronavirus. It will reopen on the 19th of May. In the meantime, movement restrictions across the country have been lifted, but the curfew is still in place. This week, we'll be bringing you the very best of France 24's reporting from around the world. We'll be going to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and to Cameroon. But first, we start in India. The country has been hit by a new strain of coronavirus, and the situation is completely out of control. Hospitals are full, people are being treated at home or even on the streets, and oxygen stocks are extremely low. It's a report by Alban Alvarez, Navudita Komari, and Mathilde Cousin for France 24.
This is a race where losing could result in death. Thousands of people across New Delhi have been rushing to oxygen plants like this one to refill their oxygen cylinders. New Delhi has been recording more than 20,000 new COVID cases every day, pushing the need for oxygen through the roof. Neither the hospitals nor the authorities are able to meet the demand.
मैं घर जाकर सो नहीं सकता, मेरे पास टैंक में गैस है और मैं सिलेंडर नहीं भेज पाऊँ। चिंता यही है कि अगर मेरी वजह से कोई बंदा मर गया तो फिर मेरा काम कोई फायदा नहीं।
Each day, nearly 800 people visit this roadside oxygen camp set up in the parking lot of a Sikh temple.
ऑक्सीजन बिल्कुल डाउन होती जा रही है, डाउन होती जा रही है। तो कम से कम थोड़ा सा तसल्ली होगी ना, तो ऑक्सीजन बढ़ रही है, तो कुछ भाग दौड़ तभी तो करेंगे। एक लड़का है वो घूमता फिर रहा है, ऑक्सीजन कहीं मिल नहीं रही है।
To help hospitals deal with the shortage of beds, this charitable organization has set up a 1,200-bed facility. Despite opening a week ago, they haven't received any oxygen from the government.
काफ़ी पेशेंट्स आए भी हैं, हम उनको हाथ जोड़ के रिक्वेस्ट ही कर सकते हैं और हमने वही किया कि इट विल टेक 1 to 2 days की स्टार्ट होने में, तो उसके अलावा हम कुछ कर नहीं सकते क्योंकि हेल्पलेस हैं।
Many countries have started sending aid to India, but it's only a tiny drop in the ocean as the country faces off against a tsunami of fresh cases.
You can watch the long version of this report in the focus section of our website, france24.com. Now to Cameroon, another country faced with a serious coronavirus outbreak. There, some evangelical pastors are still celebrating Mass with no social distancing. Some go as far as to say that worshippers have divine protection. Now, the government has decided to crack down on these pastors. It's a report by Tony Menga and Regina Sando.
Filled with spirit, a woman goes into trance while the pastor preaches. Worshippers gather for service at a revival church in Yaoundé. Those attending pay little attention to social distancing measures. They have been convinced that they are immune to COVID-19.
Nous sommes des chrétiens. Nous pensons à une chose qui est vraie, que c'est Jésus-Christ qui guérit. Nous pouvons prendre des médicaments. Nous pouvons prendre des cures, et des cures, et des cures de médicaments. Mais il y a une seule chose. Après avoir pris ces médicaments, c'est Jésus-Christ qui guérit.
The congregation is passionate about Reverend Asila. He has been the lead pastor of this Pentecostal church for more than 3 years. Cameroon is currently battling a spike in coronavirus infections. Nevertheless, the pastor uses the same towel to touch and bless Christians. He acknowledges the risks.
Ce serait une hérésie de dire que ni moi qui suis homme de Dieu, ni les fidèles ne seront pas touchés par coronavirus. Personne n'est à l'abri de quoi que ce soit, mais c'est Dieu qui nous protège. Mes fidèles sont un peu plus protégés que les païens.
A false claim shared by many pastors. There are over 350 revival churches in the country. They continue to hold large religious gatherings in defiance of government rules and regulations. The minister responsible for churches and religious groups has threatened to sanction these churches.
Lorsqu'un pasteur vous dit le Covid n'existe pas, lorsqu'un pasteur vient bluffer en disant qu'avec de l'eau bénite, par lui-même, il peut guérir le Covid, je trouve que c'est extrêmement dangereux. Je crois que ces gens-là, ils ont leur place en prison et je leur donne, c'est le dernier avertissement que je leur donne.
Cameroon has just received its first doses of coronavirus vaccine. The second wave of COVID-19 in the country has been deadlier than the first.
The US Army is pulling out of Afghanistan, leaving local forces defend themselves alone against the Taliban. The insurgents control roughly half the country right now. When they are forced to retreat, they leave deadly minefields behind. Our correspondents Sonia Ghezali and Shazaib Boualla went to meet the wounded and those forced to flee their villages. Here is their report.
Kandahar, the cradle of the Taliban movement. For several months, the insurgents have been carrying out fierce attacks against the Afghan forces. Every day, dozens of wounded people come to this hospital. They all come from villages which Afghan forces recently took back from the Taliban after the insurgents controlled the area for several months.
Now that we've amputated your leg, you'll need to wait 3 days. Do you have any other pain?
These patients were injured by mines, hidden throughout their villages by the Taliban. There are so many of them that Afghan forces still have not been able to secure the entire area for the returning residents.
We don't have enough space to accommodate all the wounded people. Every day new patients arrive, like this one, who lost both his legs, and the person who's in the operating room right now. He lost both his legs and one arm.
Turjan is a miracle worker.
We fled our village. We were away for 6 months. We returned 10 days after the Taliban left. When I entered my house with one of my relatives, there was an explosion.
When fighting broke out in their village 6 months ago, these families who now live in tents fled from home. Far from their farms, they're destitute and rely completely on the help and donations they get from locals. Mohammed Rani knows that his village is infested with mines, but he wants to go home anyway.
It is so hot here, and we are under the sun. There is no shade. We have so little food every day, and no money at all. And then there is no water point in the camp, so we have to go every day to get some from a tank further away.
Last year, nearly 1,600 people were injured by mines in Afghanistan. 80% of the victims were children.
Now to Iraq, where a group of Baghdadis have decided to defend the country's remarkable heritage. Decades of war and neglect have ruined the buildings and the country's traditions and culture. It's a report by Lucille Wasserman and Sam Brad-Pierce.
The hammering of metal on metal was once so loud that it was hard to have a conversation at this Baghdad souk. But Nazem Hassan says the copper market has grown quieter with every passing year.
Now most of the stores are selling cloth. There are just 10 to 15 coppersmiths left. If anyone comes to buy now, they only buy it as a gift.
Nazem's craft dates back to the Abbasid period. When he started in the middle of the last century, the goods he sold were functional and not just used as ornaments.
The world developed using other new methods. Now everything's electrical. They used to wash their clothes with special containers that we make, and there was no electricity. Everyone used lanterns and candles, but now everything has evolved. It's not like the past anymore.
The lack of tourism and local buyers means Hassan sells nothing on most days, but his troubles are symptomatic of a broader neglect of Baghdad's cultural heritage.
If you walk out from the souk onto historic Rashid Street, you can see it's also the capital's architectural history, which is under threat. If you look at this building, it's practically falling down. Nearly all of the buildings on this street were constructed before 1930, but nothing's been done to protect them or to renovate them. They've been threatened by neglect and multiple rounds of conflict, most recently in 2019 during the anti-government protests.
To address these concerns, Al Khalil Nasser heads a collective of journalists and local intellectuals who publish Baghdadiyun, a newspaper advocating for better management of the capital's heritage.
No one is paying attention to this side. And when you ask the mayor or the others, mayor of Baghdad or other, they say we need money, and the money we have is not that enough to maintain this street, I mean.
Owners say that bureaucratic hurdles and the expensive renovation prevent them from preserving historic buildings.
We went to them and asked them to renovate the facade of the building to restore it as it was. And they told us this was not allowed, that we must get approval from them. And so wait a year or two until we get the authorization.
In response to these grievances, the Baghdad governor's office told France 24 that a new committee was being formed to protect the area's historical buildings. But until active steps are taken to do so, the city's heritage will continue to crumble.
That's it for this edition. I'd like to thank our camera women, Armelko and Elodie Radnak, as well as our producer, Young Chim. I leave you with these pictures of the Château de Versailles chapel that has just undergone major renovation during the lockdown. Thank you for watching the show. Please be safe and stay tuned to France 24.